Hello, so this lesson is on exploration, which is travelling. So the first thing I want you to do is have a go at the stretch back questions. These are questions that you should know and be able to answer and recall from your memory quite easily. So pause the lesson now and have a go at answering those questions. Okay, so let's go through the answers together. So how were boys educated? Well, boys could go to grammar schools. The more elite boys, the richer boys could have a private tutor as well. They could go on to university. However, there was only two. How were the lower class girls educated? Well, they weren't. Higher class girls could be educated at home or at petty schools. Which religion was Elizabeth? She was Protestant. And why was Mary Queen of Scots a threat? Well, because she was Catholic and she had a right to the throne, the Catholics saw her as a better alternative to Elizabeth. So, what is exploration? Well, it's travelling overseas. English sailors were able to use the expertise of the Portuguese and Spanish sailors as they had already been exploring for a long time. There was more development on longitude and latitude, which made it easier to sail. New trading markets were needed to be established after the collapse of the wool trade, and they wanted to create a market in India and China so they could trade goods between those countries. People also wanted to civilise other countries and convert them to Christianity. New technology had a great impact on exploration. The printing press, which was like a printer, meant there was more maps being printed, and it meant it was easier to know where you were going. People dared to risk going a little bit further. Astrolabes were being created, which was a way of, it's kind of like a compass, a way of knowing where you're going. Ship design changed, and this meant that stronger and faster ships and English sailors used more rapid firing guns, so they were less likely to be attacked. So, Drake's circumnavigation of the world. Drake intended to attack the Spanish ships and make a profit for himself. Drake was the first Englishman to sail all the way around the world. Circumnavigate the globe. That's what circumnavigate means. It's to go all the way around the world. Between 1577 and 1580. He went on to play a huge role in the Spanish Armada by attacking ships in 1587 and delaying preparations. He was also Vice Admiral during the Armada. The impact that Drake has, well, he launched successful attacks on the Spanish Empire, bringing back gold, silver, jewels, and he made a huge profit for England. He claimed new lands for England and made valuable trading contacts with the Spice Islands, and he was knighted by Elizabeth. John Hawkins, he made 3 voyages during the 1560s, capturing Africans and selling them into slavery in Central America to the Spanish settlers in America. After he returned to England and designed and built ships for the Navy, Elizabeth appointed him as Vice Admiral fighting against the Spanish Armada. The impact that Hawkins had was that he developed a new type of fighting boat which was faster, lighter and able to withstand harsh weather conditions. This kind of helped in the Armada because the weather was bad, which meant that the Spanish were at a severe disadvantage. His designs were important in helping lead the English to victory during the Armada. So, what we're going to do, have a go at watching this video and then you're going to be answering some questions on them.
In this pod, we'll consider exploration in Elizabethan England and the voyages of discovery.
During Elizabeth's reign, many people became interested in exploring the globe. This was partly due to trade. The war against Spain, the trouble in the Netherlands, and the collapse of the wool and cloth trade all led to merchants seeking new trade routes and locations for profit. Voyages of discovery, financed by the Queen or other wealthy nobles, could result in lots of treasure or money being brought back. As a result, though they were dangerous, they were very popular among the wealthy.
Ship design was improved. Bigger sails were added to enable ships to move faster. Firepower was increased, and stability was also improved. This encouraged people to travel further across the globe. The idea of adventure, exploring unknown places and gaining wealth and status, was highly appealing to young men.
New technologies such as quadrants, which were instruments used for celestial navigation, and astrolabes, which helped to calculate latitude, made journeying to new places safer.
Standardized maps also helped with navigation. Finally, the triangular slave trade was established. This involved the trading of goods to Africa in exchange for people who would work as slaves. The slaves would be taken to America and the Caribbean to be sold. Finally, the money generated from these sales would be used to purchase cargo, such as rum and sugar, to take back to England. It was pioneered by John Hawkins and provided a lucrative opportunity. Many others opted to run the same trade route.
The most famous voyage of discovery was led by Sir Francis Drake, the privateer. Remember, a privateer was an authorised mercenary, an armed person legally allowed to capture merchant shipping. Between 1577 and 1580, he journeyed across the whole of the globe. This is known as circumnavigation. The journey was motivated by Drake's deep dislike of the Spanish, who had killed most of his men in an earlier voyage. He planned to sail to attack Spanish territories in the Pacific, as the defence of these areas was weaker. Drake was also a Puritan and saw this voyage as a chance to weaken Catholic powers. Finally, the capture of gold, treasures and land would increase England's power and provide an opportunity to establish new trade routes.
When Drake first set sail in December 1577, he left with 5 ships and a crew of 164 sailors. Initially, they sailed towards and around Brazil, heading to Port St. Julian in Patagonia, which is modern-day Argentina. Here there was trouble on the mainland amongst the crew. Dissatisfaction among the crew was so high that Drake tried his friend Thomas Doughty for mutiny and killed him. He set fire to 2 of his own ships and proceeded with a reduced crew.
In September 1578, they reached the Pacific, but here one of the ships sank and the other was lost. It would eventually make its way back to England. Drake was left with just 1 ship and low supplies. It was at this point that he made a series of attacks upon Spanish settlements and gained a lot of wealth.
At this point, Drake was faced with a decision. Should he return back the way he came and be attacked by Spanish fleets? Or should he push forward into the unknown and travel around North America? He opted to push forward, and sometime later, he and his remaining 55 crewmen landed in California. They landed in California and named it Nova Albion, meaning New England. The local people, or natives as they were then known, thought that Drake was a god and gifted him with tobacco. Drake continued his journey from Nova Albion back towards England, making many lucrative spice trading deals along the way. He arrived back in England in September 1580.
The voyage increased England's reputation on the sea. It gained new territory for England, as well as establishing new trade agreements. This led to more agreements with China, West Africa and India. England's government began to view the Navy in a new light and tasked it with more defence responsibilities. Ultimately, Drake's voyages further deteriorated English relations with Spain. The knighting of Drake on the deck of the Golden Hind, his last remaining ship, was seen as a direct challenge to Spain and made war inevitable.
So, pause the video now and have a go at answering the questions on the board. Okay, so let's go through the answers together. So, who financed or paid for the journeys? It was Elizabeth or noblemen. Why were they so popular? They established trade routes with India and China, and they brought back goods such as tobacco. What were better about the ships? They were lightweight and faster. What was being printed more commonly? They were maps. What is circumnavigation? It's going all the way around the world. So, have a go at this. I have taken away the sentence starters because we've done these several times now online. So, describe 2 features of technological development which enabled exploration. What it means is, what technology was created which meant that people could then explore other countries. So, use the information you've got. Remember, it's 2 points and then 2 bits of specific detail. 4 sentences, no more. Pause the video now and have a go. Okay, so some recap questions. Pause the video again and have a go at answering them. We will go through them once you have finished. Okay, so let's go through them. During which decade of Elizabeth's reigns were harvests particularly bad? It was the 1590s. Poverty was caused because farmers enclosed their fields and instead of growing crops, looked after which animal? It was sheep. Which local government officials looked after property related to issues? It was the Justice of Peace, the JPs. The 1572 Vagabonds Act punished vagrants. What happened to someone who was repeatedly caught begging? They were whipped, they were set on fire in their right ear, or they were sent to prison. The 1601 Poor Law set up places for genuinely deserving cases to live in. What were they called? the workhouses. Which religious group opposed theatres? It was the Puritans. Okay, so who was Raleigh? He was a famous sailor, explorer and courtier. The Queen invested in his privateering expeditions against the Spanish. He wanted to establish colonies for Elizabeth in North America. The area was thought to have a supply of wine, oil, sugar and flax, and would reduce England's trade independence upon Europe. In 1584, he obtained a real charter, which means permission, to establish a colony, which means to take control of somewhere, on Roanoke Island off the coast of North Carolina. He organised 2 expeditions to take settlers to the colony. The first group came home after a year, and as Drake had to bring home the starving people when he went and checked on them. The second were left there, but later disappeared. There's no conclusive proof of what happened to the colonists. Perhaps they were forced to leave, ran away, or lacked food. The reasons for the disappearance are unclear, and Roanoke is something given the name, the Lost Colony. The impact, well, he was part of the later ongoing attacks against the Spanish in the 1590s and contributed to intellectual culture by writing poems. So let's watch a quick video.
In this pod, we'll consider the significance of Sir Walter Raleigh and the colonisation of Virginia.
Sir Walter Raleigh was an explorer. In 1584, he was funded by Queen Elizabeth I to journey to North America and establish a new English colony. Raleigh planned and organised 2 voyages that attempted to do so, though he did not go with the voyages at this stage. In fact, he did not lead the voyages himself until the end of Elizabeth's reign. However, they are still referred to as Raleigh's voyages.
North America was a favourable place to colonise for a number of reasons. Its location would be advantageous for attacks against the Spanish, where the English could raid their local territories and prevent Spanish and French troops from settling there. It would also raise the reputation of England, allow it access to a range of new resources, and provide a better life for the poor, who could acquire land and find work in North America.
Raleigh was able to persuade a number of investors that the colony would be profitable. A lot was riding on this bet. A successful North American colony would pave the way for other colonies elsewhere. In 1584, Raleigh sent a team to Virginia to explore its suitability for a colony. They returned, claiming that Virginia was full of fertile land, animals and friendly locals. In 1585, 107 colonists left England for Virginia. They were largely soldiers and sailors, although there were a few craftsmen on board.
The colonists ran into trouble. They hit rocks which allowed seawater into the ship, damaging the seeds they reserved for crops. Explorer Sir Ralph Lane began to build a settlement on Roanoke Island, off the coast of modern-day North Carolina. The sailor, Sir Richard Grenville, returned to England to collect more colonists. However, while he was gone, relations with the locals began to sour. Eventually, in June 1586, the colony was abandoned. The colonists had relied upon the natives for food. When relations soured, the colonists began to starve.
Sir Francis Drake picked up the last of the colonists on the return stretch of his circumnavigation of the globe. However, upon his return to England, Ralph Lane persuaded Elizabeth to explore another location, Chesapeake Bay, which was rumoured to have gold mines beneath it.
In 1587, a second voyage left for North America, this time to Chesapeake Bay, north of Roanoke Island. This expedition was led by John White. However, they once again had to land on Roanoke, when hurricane fears prevented them from going any further. They set about establishing a second colony there, but it was too late to plant seeds. Relations with the locals were strained, largely due to the previous failed colony attempt.
John White decided to return to England to gather more supplies. However, all English ships were called upon to fight against the Spanish Armada in 1588. He was unable to return to Roanoke Colony until 1590. When he eventually returned, there was nobody to be found. All they could find was the word Croatoan carved into a fence post, and the letters CRO carved into a nearby tree. It was suspected the colonists had relocated to Croatoan Island, but they could not search for them due to the encroaching bad weather. We do not know for sure what happened to the colony, so it is now referred to as the Lost Colony.
Raleigh's attempts to forge colonies failed for numerous reasons. Food supplies did not survive the journey. There were also outbreaks of disease, starvation, bad relations with the locals, and a lack of leadership and experience in the colonies. In particular, the colonies were too far from England to gather any English support easily. However, they did return a profit due to the capture of Spanish ships. They also introduced the potato to England, added to world knowledge, and paved the way for future colony attempts. By the late 1600s, 13 successful colonies had been established in the New World.
Okay, so pause the lesson and then answer the questions, and then we'll go through it once you've finished. Okay, so let's go through the answers together. So Raleigh was a famous pioneer, a sailor. He tried to colonise Virginia. Where was the lost colony? It was in Virginia near California. What happened to the first colony? Well, they were brought home. They were starving. Who brought the first colony home? It was Drake. And why were voyages seen as a good thing? Well, they brought trade, goods such as tobacco, trade with India and China. So, your task is to explain why you think Roanoke failed. I've given you some starting points. You have to explain why that would lead to failure. So, for example, I think Roanoke failed because of lack of food. This would lead to failure because, etc., etc., etc. I don't just want a sentence. I want you to include a couple of them. So pause the lesson now and have a go. Okay, so now you've finished the lesson, log on to show my homework and complete the quiz so I can assess how much you've learned.